Well, it's clearly a new age at Kings Island with the new Six Flags taking the helm, taking over the company. But one thing that the old Six Flags was notorious for was putting ads on everything. And we're starting to see that at Kings Island. So, where do you draw the line? At what point does it diminish the guest experience? Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Hey, let's kick this off by thanking our Prestige members. I want to give a special shout out to Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lipper, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Hornack, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, Songster Smiku, Dakota Cole, and Lack Ray. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers can get some free stuff. So hit that link in the description if you're interested.
So Ryan, you're talking about ads. There's that fine line between the necessary sponsorships that the park is going to have and those overwhelming ads that Six Flags was notorious for.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Six Flags, one of their parks, they even had a banner hanging from a tree. That's how much they were slapping ads all over the place. But we're not saying ads don't belong here. So don't get that idea if you're listening to this episode. But at what point though does it start to feel, if you're at the park, that it feels more like Times Square than Kings Island?
Exactly, and as of this recording, there's a huge debate going on online as to the necessary evil or the hatred of or the love of Fastlane. And I think both of us and anybody listening can acknowledge that there is kind of a necessary evil that's there as far as the ads and stuff. It's going to, buoy the company. It's going to save them. It's going to make them be able to reinvest in the company or in the individual parks. But there comes a point where it does damage the charm of the park.
I mean, it does. I know, historically, go back to 1972. I mean, there's been sponsors in the park. I mean, it's been, the Sunshine Turnpike sponsored by Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
You've had the fireworks sponsored by Marathon and different, companies that out there. I remember, the shows. Those all had sponsors, whether it was the shows in the indoor theater, Kings Island Theater, or the outdoor stages. 1986, for example, was Deep in the Heart of Country, presented by Delta Airlines. That's kind of subtle, not in your face, but when you're riding something like the antique cars and they've got the Progressive Insurance, ads, plastered on the walls, or they've got the things now through the midways that are showing the different ads.
Yeah.
That it's a little more aggressive, it seems, this year than it has been in the past. It's not as subtle, and I think that's where we're starting to see that conversation popping up now that it's starting to take over a little bit and taking away from that charm.
I agree, and where it stands now with these things, this is okay, in my opinion. But I would say that it's really, really, really close to that line where it starts to get cheesy.
Yeah, I mean that's not hanging from a tree. We're not there yet.
No.
Not like we saw at Six Flags, but it's still, it starts to get a little tacky when it's too much. And then I know, Six Flags was known for putting stickers on the ride vehicles.
Yeah.
Like Snickers and the other sponsors, and how far away are we from seeing that on the Beast trains, the racer trains, Mystic Timbers, and, other attractions in the park. And I think that's where I would draw the line. Is I don't want to see it get to that point.
I don't either. Now, you had some experience with these ads, so why don't you walk us through a little bit at least with the old Cedar Fair, the kind of process. One thing that comes to mind is when you had Fright Lane sponsored by Safe Auto. That might have been chain wide, but do you remember that being implemented? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, that was one of the more subtle things, though, because it was still, something that was just on the website where it just had it, it was just referenced. There was, some signage in the park with Fastlane. It would say, who the sponsor was, but it wasn't, consistently like in your face. You weren't walking through the midways and seeing that sponsor, dominate. It was just subtle, part of the branding for that product.
Yeah. So, and you didn't believe that that would diminish the product. I mean, I don't think it did. I'm not playing
No,
devil's
not something like that. And it was more of a written, kind of thing than it was something that was being plastered all over the place. In the park, they did have some of those, boards that would say that, out front to get your fast lane or your fright lane, whatever the sponsor was for those kind of things. But it wasn't as dominant as what we're seeing in these pictures now, where you're seeing, Snickers and some of the other things just being put out there on those information boards.
Mm,
And that's when people are starting to think it's a little bit over the top. The shows were all, it wasn't signage dominated; it was verbally spoken. That, like I said, deep in the heart of the country, presented by Delta Airlines.
mm.
It would just be something like that. So, you're seeing more of it now. We see that the Food and Wine Festival has a sponsor.
Yeah.
The fire, the nighttime show has a sponsor. So I think that one's M&M's now, or one of those things. I think M&M's just
I don't
now
think
appeared
M&M
as one of the
sponsors a
sponsors.
nighttime show. They are sponsoring the 4th of July though.
That's
That
what it is. Yeah, the
particular
4th of
show.
July, right?
Now for
Right. So it's starting to become more like on everything, but we don't want to. I don't want to see it on all the ride vehicles.
right.
But I think we're gonna get. I think we're gonna get there, Ryan.
I think that I think that they'll do it. They'll try it. It'll be this season, and people will throw such a fit that they won't feel like they can do it in the future because we've never had that before. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and I hope you are, this is an example. This I don't know where this is, but this is an Aero train that is wrapped in a sponsor. You know, Church's Chicken sponsored. This looks like what a B&M stand up or perhaps floorless.
Yeah.
So that's
Right. Right.
crazy.
So that's the kind of stuff. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we don't want to see. I think that cheapens it. I think you start to look like Times Square rather than Kings Island. You take away the charm, the atmosphere of the park when it becomes dominated with
I
sponsorships.
agree. Now, let me show you an example of like an appropriate sponsorship. So, Kings Island did something very similar to this years ago with Haunt, but they have this contest that's sponsored by, is it Takis? Is that how you pronounce it? You guys
Yeah.
work with them. I don't know. I've never had them before. But I'm okay with this. I think that it's a co-branding because it's clearly already messaging and stuff. This is not,
Yeah, stuff like that's not that bad. I don't mind that, but it's the signs, hanging from a tree, or
mhm.
it's just in your face all the time. Nobody needs that. The other thing you could do is you take a sponsor, why not put it on like the sleeve of the employee uniforms? Something like that would be a little more subtle
Yeah.
rather than having it, hanging from the midways, or every time you turn a corner, here's one of those boards, flashing a sponsor in your face.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, so far, this is where we're at. We got Flow from Progressive, which is all over the antique autos, which I'm okay with this one, actually. Uh,
That one kind of fits. That's a different thing too. Does it fit where it's going? Now, if you put Snickers there and you put Snickers on the vehicles, then it's not a fit to me.
yeah.
But that kind of blends in, so that one's not too bad.
Yeah. And then, of course, we've got these screens, and these are different ads. Obviously, M&M Mars is partner of the park now. It's very apparent. We saw these wayfinders come in last year. We knew that they were paid for by a sponsor, but I don't think it was M&M Mars. Honestly, I think that just the sponsor that paid for it gets a certain percentage of the ad rolls and stuff. But these assets, I think the park has the ability to fit in there. Um,
Yeah, but you mentioned Progressive. I mean, that's like it's a natural fit there, so that kind of works. But you try that somewhere else, and it's not going to work.
Try that in a small town, Don.
Yeah, you just don't. I mean, there's just a lot of risk here, Ryan, of losing like the park's soul when it comes to these ads and the atmosphere of the park. That you have to be, you have to really be careful about what you're doing.
You do, and so it's funny because even there have been times that you or I or anybody else has lost faith in even the old Cedar Fair, but it was never in the conversation of they're going to slap Twix stickers on the Beast trains or anything like that. It was always thought that that was outside of their, shall we say, moral flexibility. Well, this is a new team now, and
Right. So yeah, I would not be surprised if we see that at some point. Maybe later this summer next year, as they definitely need the revenue streams. We know that,
mhm.
but I think you have to be a little careful. You don't want it to look tacky, and let's be honest, no one's going home talking about the sponsors that they saw in the park.
No. And it'd be cool, like sponsor all the stuff that's in front of people, but doesn't matter. Like, why doesn't the app have a sponsor? If you want to have the app brought to you by Safe Auto every time I load the thing up, that's fine. That doesn't cheapen the park at all. I think I just gave him an idea. I want commission off that.
Yeah, exactly.
um, but I, I think that there's a line to draw. So I want to ask the viewers, put in the comments what you're seeing now, especially with the slides that I showed you where the park is now. Are you okay with that? How far would you let them go with ads before it starts to get tacky? Do you think that any ads is good or bad? As Don mentioned, they've had ads since the beginning. Remember the even like the airplane show that they had nightly was sponsored by
Hmm.
Firestone. That was a really big deal.
Right, right. Yeah, so they've always had it, but it was always more subtle or it was a natural fit.
Yeah.
And that way it works. But when you just start cramming it everywhere, any space in the park, you're going to put up an ad for something. That's when it becomes a little tacky. That's when it becomes that Times Square look. And that's when you start to lose the charm of Kings Island.
So one thing that I've always kind of worried about, not really worried about, but pondered, is the other side of the coin. So you've got like the Coke marketplace, and the Coke marketplace is perfect. They sell Coke. People are thirsty. It's the summer. They've got a place where you can get Coke stuff. It's themed to vintage Coke. It's brilliant. But
Natural fit.
you and I have talked about they have real problems with the machines always being out of drinks or it not tasting right because something's off in the machine or there's no ice ever. So, do you think that that could damage Coke's shield potentially if they're putting their name on things and then they don't have control over them?
Yes. Sponsors are always worried about things like that. So if they're seeing a lot of chatter online about Coke Marketplace doesn't have any ice, Coke Marketplace, um, all the machines were out of Coke,
Yeah.
or it tastes right. Yeah, they're definitely going to look at that and monitor that, and they're going to have concerns if that becomes a topic of conversation.
Yeah, because I've always, well, not nowadays. I think it's gotten a lot better, but in the past, especially with like Skyline Chili, like 10 years ago, Skyline at the park was really bad. And I've always wondered how Skyline, the company, felt. I always assumed they made enough money that it didn't matter to them. But I've always wondered if they were concerned that the product at the park did not taste like the product outside the park, with the product outside the park being a much better product. I've always wondered if they ever had concerns with that. You know,
Yeah, they absolutely had concerns with that because for a lot of people, they're coming from out of town to go to Kings Island. That's their first ever exposure to Skyline Chili. So that's their first taste of it. It wasn't great. What are the odds that they're going to go to one of the restaurants, as they're leaving, town or whatever, and they see, off the side of the expressway, our dining options, get something to eat at night or whatever. They're going to go to Skyline or they're going to go to Taco Bell.
right?
So yeah, that was definitely concerned about that.
Or they'll go to Gold Star. So
Go
so my I've often I think about these things because I worry about things that are not my problem, and I've often wondered about that. And you've got the La Rosa's argument too. Like I think the La Rosa's in the park is often better than the La Rosa's outside of the park, which I think at the end of the day probably works to La Rosa's advantage. But the product is very different, because if you
It is, and it comes down to the ovens, with the La
yeah.
Rosas, that they're using a different oven than what you now see in the stores with La Rosas.
Yeah, La Rosa's uses traditional pizza ovens. I don't know what they're using at Kings Island, but to me, also La Rosa's is like you rarely go there and get cheese pizza or pepperoni pizza. Like they're really into their meat lovers, their double pepperoni topper and stuff like that. Plus, they only have the one crust at Kings Island, so I feel like it's a poor as in non-holistic representation of the product that La Rosa's is.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
but with that being said, it does help with the fun kind of polarization where, you get 30% of the people who say that's not pizza, which I do say that argument because I've said on the show before, I feel like you're hungry for pizza or you're hungry for La Rosa's and one does not satisfy the craving for the other. Um, but you get 30% of the people who think it's just not pizza and it's not right. And you get 70% of the people that when I come to Kings Island, I get their pizza, So this is where we're at right now. When these digital wayfinders they're not wayfinders because they're not touchscreen, but when these digital screens were installed, we knew that there were ads coming. They do have some cool like Kings Island media and stuff on it. And some of them this is all the same one. but they are kind of like themed to their areas, so that's kind of cool. But again, this is a slippery slope. Where Kings Island's at right now is really walking up to that line. So we'll see you in August. We'll revisit this because I've got a feeling more of this is
Yeah.
coming.
Well, hopefully it stays, kind of subtle. It's not too much in your face. It doesn't ruin the charm. And, one of the ideas that we talked about earlier, I mentioned earlier, was I think, you could put something on the sleeve of the employee uniforms, and that would look better than trying to slap something on the ride vehicles.
I was even thinking, like, what if I mean, they would have to want to do this stuff, but they could use it to their advantage in terms of bring back midnight closes on Saturdays like they used to have them, and have uh, tonight's midnight close is brought to you by Taco Bell. We're open late or whatever. Like, don't you think
Exactly.
that's a match made in heaven?
It is. That would work. That's a natural
I
tie-in.
know. See, they wouldn't hire me to sell their ads. I would have reached out to the local Taco Bell and had them doing it. Uh, yeah. So interesting slope. Again, leave in the comments where you think we're at with this. How do you feel about it? And do you think it's going down the right way or the wrong way? Or do you not care? So long as there's revenue involved, it doesn't matter, because ultimately the beast is the beast, no matter what kind of stickers are on it. But let's move on to some Tower Topics tidbits for your information.
All right. Well, back in 2014, you might recall that Kings Island offered a great Father's Day deal. It was a special all-you-can-eat barbecue cookout and family activities in the park's picnic grove. Dads even ate for free with the purchase of another Father's Day barbecue meal ticket. Now, this year, Ryan, the park is celebrating Father's Day with a different kind of deal. It's a season pass bring a friend offer for just $24.99.
I know the Father's Day thing was that did sell out, I believe, or it was successful. The problem that they ran into was when they had Father's Day bring a friend for like $9.99. That
Right.
was problematic. $24.99. I mean, you account for inflation; they're about the same price. But are you comfortable with $24.99, or do you think that's product degradation? I know Father's Day is not a highly attended day
I think
typically.
that's not a bad price. I think though you would bring more people to the park if you had something like the barbecue deal that they did in 2014. That's more of an incentive to come than trying to find, bring your friends on Father's Day. That's a tough day to bring your friends out.
Why did they? Right, because I'm trying to. I was equating this to Father's Day in terms of the father can bring his friends, but that's a little absurd because the father's going to bring his kids there, and they're not going to have bring a friend tickets. It's going to be they all have season passes or whatever. Um, why do you think they went this route, $24.99 for bring a friend, and for Mother's Day they did that nice dinner? Did they prefer mothers to fathers?
Well, I think when you think of Mother's Day, you're thinking more of a brunch kind of a thing
Mm-hmm.
than you wouldn't think of a brunch for Father's Day. You would think of something like the barbecue deal, and that wasn't something that they chose to do. They haven't done that for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it was very successful when they did do that. But they do throw out the bring of friends a lot of times on things like Mother's Day or Father's Day, and $24.99 is a great deal if you have friends that don't have a pass, so it'll work there for you with that kind of a price. But it's not a great day to try to find friends that can go to the park because everyone's doing something with their fathers. So it's not really going to move the needle too much in terms of attendance,
Mm-hmm.
or something like an incentive for you to go to Kings Island, with your father, want to go there because they have, some kind of a great deal with, like they had with the barbecue, all you can eat.
Cool. What's up? What's next?
Next, we have Coaster Stock 2025 officially in the books. While attendees enjoyed reconnecting with old friends, making new ones, hearing from guest speakers, going on behind the scene tours, and experiencing those exclusive ride time sessions. For the first time attendees, they absolutely loved it. But some of the returners, what they've expressed is that they felt the event was missing some of its signature charm. Several of those beloved traditions were noticeably absent this year. Uh, it was brought up that there was no photo contest. That was always a big deal. No scavenger hunt. No chicken dance. That had become an annual tradition in front of the Fest House. There was no coaster stock feud that was done in the picnic grove. when they were having the meals. That was always a fun, engaging activity. No social media rock stars, no amazing coaster stock race. So without those elements, for some, and these are people that have attended the event, year after year, whether they posted it on social media or they just, messaged us and let us know how it was going. They felt that it was really just 2 very long days, and the consensus was clear. Hollywood Nights offered a much more engaging and memorable experience for us. That's where you and I were, and those that attended that event. So there was like I said, people enjoyed it. It was fun. It was about the camaraderie, seeing friends in that. But there was a lot of things that had been part of the coaster stock tradition that just weren't there this year that people they missed.
Yeah, it's like, to me, I when I started hearing people saying like, "Oh, I had fun," kind of like that attitude, I was mainly thinking, well, it rained Friday morning, and that kind of put a damper on it. They still ran most of the rides except for Soapbox Racers, but you're right. When we found out that they weren't doing the photo contest, the social media rock star, the was it the Coaster Stock Feud? Was that like Family Feud?
My Family Feud, exactly. Yeah, so
Um,
that had become a fun game for everybody to kind of engage in.
yeah, so that's kind of a shame because that seems like a great opportunity to do stuff like that with other people that like care about the park and would know about the park and stuff.
Right.
For ours at Hollywood Nights, they did Holiday World Trivia, and that was a good time. I mean, there are people that know that park way better than I do, probably way better than you do as well. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. And but we had a great time, and but we were getting throughout the 2 days we were getting messages from people that had attended a lot of the coaster stocks through the year, some, all of them, just saying that, I can't believe they're not doing this. I can't believe they're not doing that. One of the misses that we didn't mention here was the lanyards,
yeah,
with the card with the itinerary. That was a big deal, for people that like to collect those kind of things. So there was just a lot of misses, but overall, I mean, everybody, they seemed like they still had a good time, and it was about the camaraderie, seeing old friends, making new friends. The ERTs, were great. The guest speakers were great. It's just those little touches that the event did not have this year. And one of the things that people found interesting was that uh, there was a departure on the Kings Island team. So they had to bring in, Kyle Kruthoffer from King's Dominion to help out, but it turned out he wasn't helping out. He pretty much was running the event,
hmm
and the other individual from the park, she was not seen too much except for like the tours and that. So that was something that people noted, that it wasn't really even run by Kings Island. It was somebody that came from another park to do that.
so sponsorship. Kings Island's coaster stock brought to you in part by King's Dominion.
Yeah, exactly.
Match made
So
in heaven.
yeah, but Kyle knew what. I mean, Kyle had done 3 coaster stocks with me, so he had a pretty good idea of what to do. And I heard on the first night, the Friday night, people were telling me that he was serving the soft drinks, and asking people if they were enjoying the event. That's great to see that. And you expect that out of Kyle. That he's going to do those kind of things because he cares. He wanted to make sure the event was, was well done. And he just kind of came in and took over with what they had established, and a lot of those things were not his doing, that they didn't have all these little touches that the event had become known for. The chicken dance was a huge thing. Some of them love participating in that. So hopefully, if the event comes back, that they reinstate a lot of those little touches and they make coaster stock great again for everybody, not just the first timers.
Yeah, like I remember, the chicken dance, the ridiculous stuff like that, kind of that helps to heighten the camaraderie. Because remember when we ran that KI Central event, and it was probably 2008, 2009, and we did that whole scheme where you had to ride the carousel, and if you rode the carousel, you got a ticket to do ERT,
Mm-hmm.
and like we did that just to kind of like emphasize, like, you can come here and you can get 28 rides on Diamondback, or you can really create a more memorable experience by trying things that maybe you haven't in a long time.
Yeah, we saw quite a few people at Holiday World, for Hollywood Nights, that historically they'd been at Coaster Stop, but
mhm.
because it fell on the same date, they ended up at Hollywood Nights instead of Coaster Stock. Some of them had been to every one, so their streaks ended in terms of having participated in every single coaster stocks. So hopefully, to again, if the event were to come back, that they're a little smarter about it and they don't try to go head to head on the same date with other events, because then you force people to have to choose. And when you do that, there's always some hard feelings sometimes.
Yeah, I did notice a lot of people were either this is my first Hollywood night. Well, like, there were a lot of people that it was like number 14, Mr. Shank. Um,
Yes.
but there were a
Yeah.
lot of people that was their first Hollywood nights, or they hadn't been in 6 or 7 years or whatever. They'd always gone to Coaster Stock, and and even if they're not the same weekend, even if they're back to back weekends, sometimes you do have to choose regardless. But
Yeah. There was one person that came up to me and they said, it's very telling. They said that the creator of Coaster Stock, you, who had been very involved with Kings Island Central, the media director now for Kings Island Central,
mhm,
the owner of the Kings Island Facebook group,
yeah,
all of us with Kings Island ties are at the Hollywood Nights event, and not Coaster Stock. So they all thought that was kind of, those people that came up and approached me about that, they thought that was very interesting before
well,
we chose to go.
if there's one thing that me, you, Brad, and Chris all have in common, is that the whole Hollywood Nights weekend, none of us were able to be hypnotized.
No, that was another thing. Oh my god! Well, now that you mentioned, you got to talk about this, Ryan,
We'll
real
do it
quick.
on the live. We'll do it on the live.
Okay, we'll do it on the live, but that was amazing too. But the other thing, tickets for Hollywood Nights, those went on sale, I think, in December. So it wasn't like they all went on sale at the same time, and you had to kind of pick which one you wanted to go to. Nobody knew at that time
Yeah.
that they were going to try to go head to head with this event. But again, it's in the books. A lot of friendships were made, and I think that's what it's all about. Reconnecting with those old friends and making new ones.
Perfect.
All right, moving on. The Food and Wine Festival, presented by Fairfax Credit Union, there's those sponsors,
Mm-hmm.
is now underway and runs Fridays through Sundays until June 22nd. Guest sentiment so far suggests that the event has improved over last year. Visitors they're really enjoying the expanded menu options, the live entertainment from River City, Hi-Fi Honey. However, Ryan, some have pointed out that there's an issue with the overlapping audio, music from the festival.
Oh,
The festival band, it's kind of, you know, interfering with the Grand Carousel music. Those two are hitting, and the nearby bandstand all playing at the same time. It's created kind of a chaotic soundscape, and many feel it wasn't well planned and detracts from the overall atmosphere. Just when all these different shows are going off,
sounds
and
like
those times
chaos.
they're overlapping. Yeah, a little chaos. Yeah, a little. They're kind of overlapping. So that's the only really thing that I've seen that's been kind of a negative, is just that you got the carousel going, you got the band playing, and then you've got something on the bandstand going all at the same time.
Yeah, totally. So I didn't experience that. I totally see where that's coming from, but I don't know if all three things were going at the same time when I checked it out. Walked back there. It's decorated different from previously, but not any better or worse. I think it still looks really good. Much more food. Um, Probably more wine. I don't know. I didn't check that. But they offered these sliders, and like some of my friends got it and they said it was really good. So I went to get it and they said it'll be a while because we're waiting on buns. Um, which I did appreciate, rather than taking my money and then making me wait 15 minutes for the person to get there with a box of buns. So I haven't tried anything yet, but those who did try the food, they did like it. Um, they have like a punch card thing. It's not like the carnival tasting cards, but like once you try uh, a certain amount of foods or whatever, you get like I think maybe a free dessert. It's a specialty dessert at the Sweet Spot. I didn't look too much into it, but um, yeah, it's the event is tenfold better than it was last year. I mean, if anything, like the food that I tried was terrible last year, and it looks really good this year.
Yeah,
Um,
you'd still like it to be a little more immersive, though, spread throughout
sure.
the park rather than contained in a little small area. But you and I were anxious to see how they might improve this, and it sounds like they have.
Yeah, and what's funny is, so we've got that new shelter over there by the carousel, and a lot of people have had critiques about it. I stand by everybody that says it should have been somewhere else. With that being said, it did turn out to look really cool, and the reason why I say that is because they have like festoon lighting from it, and it's like the exact same like kind of ball shape that they have on the Grand Carousel, so they kind of like blend together. But that's where they have, I think, Hi-Fi Honey plays under there. And I overheard two people. We rode the Beast at the end of the night one night over the weekend, and we're walking out at 10:45, 11 o'clock once you get cycled through that, and we were just people saying, "Hey, have you seen that new thing, man? They got this new shelter. There's a live band under there. It's great." Don't know if they know if it's for food and wine or if they think that it's like all the time, but it seems to be popular. They put the AstroTurf under it. Uh, didn't do a great job of laying that down because you can see the seams, which means they'll get ripped up. Unfortunately, that's what happened with Beagle Scout Acres. So we'll hope they maintain that and it doesn't end up looking trashy. But with that being said, applause to them. This event is 10 times more likely to be successful. Oh, and when I was back there, people were actually buying food and wine. I should throw that out there too. It wasn't a ghost town like it was last year. So it seems like
Good to hear.
it seems like there was a little bit, few more people there, a little bit more effort put into it, a little bit more thought put into it. Still some kinks to work out, still some decisions that you and I may not agree with, but overall, an improvement. All right. Um, let's move on to a segment we like to call buy or sell. Don, buy or sell? This year's coaster stock will be the last. With the direction things are going, I see special events such as this going away, or go in the direction of the dodo bird, is the way they put it. Buy or sell?
Um, with the staffing cuts and that, and then this year, rather than having somebody that was already on Kings Island staff and had been involved with this from the beginning with the planning and that this year's event, that they kind of brought someone else in to actually run the event from King's Dominion. I'm going to buy that this would be the last year for coaster stock because I just don't see who they would have at the park running it, organizing it, putting it all together, for next year. I just don't think you would be doing that out of a corporate office, in whether it's the King's Dominion's planning it or whether it's being done in Toronto. I don't know. I mean, who's going to plan it? Who's going to organize it? Who's going to be that point person for all the other departments in the park? You have to have hands on deck at the park to make something like this a success, unless you're just doing it to do it. So I'm gonna buy that. I don't think this event will come back next year.
I'm also going to buy it. The reasoning is what you listed. That's the first thing that comes to mind is there's going to be nobody at the park to run it, plan it, or advocate for it. The person that you would think would do that, they didn't even trust to run it this year. So that's out. On top of that, it clearly didn't sell out. I mean, if you look at the picture, I know like people are going to say not everybody was in the picture. I understand that, but the picture was about 500 people. So, and how many of the? And we know of several people that got to go for free. So, how many of those people were there too?
Yeah, and the fact that we were told that they could definitely tell in the picnic grove for the meals that it wasn't the size of the crowd that it had been in previous years. In previous years, you had some people that were, parked way outside the shelter. Some of them were sitting like in the grass eating their meal, and that there was an open space in the tables inside the shelter, and there was this year. So it definitely wasn't the turnout that they'd had before. And there's a number of reasons for that. Some of it is you decided to go head to head with another event. Part of it is there wasn't really the right marketing and promotion for it. They just put it on their website, threw out a social post. That was it. Previous years, the Facebook group was a huge part of that. Getting people engaged and excited. There was countdowns, and that's where a lot of that was going on. There was a lot of help from the other clubs that were participating. Letting people know when tickets were going to go on sale, and that you just did not see the chatter for it this year. That you did, whether it was the Facebook group, Kings Island Central. I mean, very little chatter about coaster stock leading up to it. So there was a lot of reasons for it not selling out this year.
Right. I think that was part. I think the main thing really is if you look at the people that would advocate for it, it's um, us theoretically, Chris from the Season Pass group, and Brad from KIC. Where were they? They they were at
Yeah.
Holiday World. Well, and it's I'm not saying Holiday World's so much better than Coaster Stock or anything like that. But what I am saying is, when the tickets go on sale for Holiday World and they're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy it, and then Coaster Stock comes announced like later, and you never know when tickets are available, and you could be left out of both if you don't buy the first one that comes up. Then how do you expect Brad or Chris or us to be excited for it when we ourselves are going to a competing event? You
Competing
know,
event, plus, none of us were sent any information about coasters. Like none of us were asked, hey, can you guys help promote this for us? None of us were given any kind of, details about nothing. And there wasn't, in the past, there was always these entities. I was on the inside there at the time, working the event and stuff. But you still with KI Central, Brad with KI Central, Chris with the Facebook group, all the different coaster clubs, everybody was, championing the event, talking it up, wanting to make sure their friends knew when tickets were going to go on sale. And you just didn't see the online chatter about it. Even the post chatter about the event. They got the Hollywood Nights Facebook group. I mean, you just see everybody just really, had a great time there, just excited about it, just blown away by those trimless voyage rides and stuff. And you just don't see a whole lot of chatter about, coaster stuff. A few people here and there talking about it, but not that group discussion that there had been in previous years. And that's unfortunate. And it's one of the reasons, why I'm going to say that, it won't come back just because, number one, who's going to run it? And number two, are they going to have those avenues to promote it to get everybody
yeah.
excited about it?
Well, again, I mean, it's just like the not winning the USA Today thing and so on. It's you burn those relationships. Of course, it's a different world and a different time, and it'll be different people next year. So who knows? Um, yeah. So we're both buying. It's probably going to be the last one, unfortunately. Don, let's move on to some theme park headline news.
Alpine Fury's track is now officially complete at Canada's Wonderland. This dual launch roller coaster is set to become the longest, tallest, and fastest launch coaster in Canada with 9 inversions. It also claims the title of the most inverting launch coaster in North America. Construction began with the arrival of the first steel track and supports on August 26, 2024. So in total, it took 281 days to complete the track. Now, by comparison, Ryan at Kings Island, it was constructed in just 168 days.
What's different now? Why does stuff take longer?
I don't know. That's, I mean, even though the track work's complete, I mean, here we are, as we record the first week of June, who knows when that's going to open? Is it the end of June, early July? I mean, it's got to go through a lot of, testing, and it's, still a ways off from opening. So I don't know why, things don't open, in April, early May like they used to, but they just don't.
Yeah. Speaking of which, and I'm guessing this didn't make it into the notes, but they also announced today that Siren's Curse will open June 28th at Cedar Point.
Yep.
So that's real. I'm actually heading to Cedar Point this weekend, and I was hoping that they would try to surprise the coast. I'm not going to Coaster Mania, but I was hoping that they would surprise the Coaster Mania people by letting them ride it first on Saturday morning, and then I'd buy a single use fast lane during the day. But that is not going to happen. But that's okay because I haven't ridden Top Thrill 2 either. We'll be right back with the listener questions. First listener question, Tom from Western Hills. He said, has Mike Kuhn bought his Silver Pass yet?
I don't think that Mike's going to need to buy a Silver Pass. I think if he wants to come, visit the park, that they'll make sure that they get him in. But if he is going to buy a Silver Pass, he needs to hurry because the opportunity to save 20% is supposed to expire on June 8th.
Unless it's extended again. Okay. Next question. Kevin from Ohio said, hey, Don and Ryan, do you think that when the next time Kings Island adds something new to Soak City, we will get an adult swim-up bar like Carowinds, Oceans of Fun, and Cedar Point Shores has? And what about another flow rider being brought back to Soak City also? Thanks.
All right, I'll start with the second part of that question. The answer is no. I don't see that happening. And yes, to the first part, I do think an adult swim-up bar is something that we will see in the foreseeable future at Soak City Water Park.
Yeah, I don't see them putting in another flow rider. I think that's just a little too niche, shall we say? But yeah. All right. Brett from Bucky's in Richmond, Kentucky. He lives there.
I
Said,
guess.
with the recent changes of a certain someone at Kings Island, will they finally have a good relationship with you all now?
No, I don't think that's going to happen because there's still a couple people involved that still go out of their way to make it difficult. That they have a problem with things. We'll mention coaster stock again. There were some people that got smirked at because they had Tower Topics shirts on, or because they were friends with me, they were kind of targeted and stuff. Uh, I just you're going to have a clean sweep of a number of people still before there's going to be somebody at the park that's going to be willing to reach out and say, hey, we'd like to work with you guys. Hey, can you guys talk about this? Can we have our chef on? Can we have somebody from merchandise on? So it's going to be a little while. There's still some roadblocks in the way before that can happen.
Fortunately, if ever there was a time when they could have a clean slate, now is possibly that time.
Yeah, but we were told that, for clarity, that uh, they would not be working with us with Tower Topics or our channels. So, it was made pretty clear. So, we have to figure as long as that individual is around that that's not going to happen.
Well, hopefully that person doesn't drown in a toilet or something. Okay. Xander from Sheffield, Ohio said, I was buying a Flight of Fear magnet when the Emporium and from the Emporium, and the girl checking me out very confidently and loudly said, good thing you're buying this now. My manager just told all of us that this is Flight of Fear and Vertigo's last season. After talking back and forth, she kept reiterating it very confidently. Obviously, I took it with a grain of salt, but wondered what you guys' thoughts were on this information. And that a park employee was sharing this, saying it was what her manager told her. Thanks.
Well, I think that if she was told by her manager, that number one, she shouldn't be sharing it with the guests. Number one,
Mm,
but I would not be surprised. I mean, the way it's going, that they are. You look around the company. I mean, there are rides that are being retired, and you look at in Vertigo, Flight of Fear. I mean, those are two rides that fit the criteria of what they're looking to get rid of. And with Mike Kuntz no longer there as the general manager, you know, is there going to be somebody that's going to fight to keep those rides? If that's attractions that they want to get rid of.
mm-hmm.
So there is the possibility. I'm not going to dismiss that that's not going to happen.
I don't think they do both. But at the same time, a merchandise manager, and by manager, she might mean supervisor, because I'd assume that a full time manager wouldn't be dumb enough to tell all their associates this stuff. But a merchandise supervisor would probably be privy to the same hearsay as everybody else. And it seems like every 21-year-old has all the answers, but very few of the questions. So um, I'm gonna say there's a possibility within Vertigo, because that's always kind of like risky, but I don't think they get rid of both. In fact, I think that in Vertigo is possible. I think Flight of Fear is a lot less likely, but them both going, I would say that there's a very, very small chance, especially if they're only
Yeah,
putting in Little Family Thrill next year.
yeah, like I said, I'm not ruling it out just because of what we've seen at other parks. Uh, but both of those rides, I don't think so. But like I said, in Vertigo to me would be the more likely
Mm-hmm.
of the two. But we'll have to see. But again, somebody has to be there to fight to keep those rides too, because we do know that they are wanting to remove some rides.
They are. Don, tell them about the T-shirts.
Tower Topics T-shirts, they come in a wicked green. They're available for $22 and include shipping. If you're interested in one, we'll send you the QR code, and all you have to do is just either send us an email at donhelbig@themeparksbydon.com, or you can go to our X and just direct message us. And again, we'll send you that QR code once the transaction goes through. Just a matter of days to get your shirt.
Perfect. And the stickers?
Stickers, they come in a couple different sizes. So 4.5 inch by 3 inch. and this includes shipping. Those are $5. Now these are going to be ideal for things like tumblers and water bottles. And then we have the 6.5 inch by 4 inch. Those are $7 each. And those are perfect for car windows. So they're kind of a vinyl type sticker. And those that have purchased those have been very happy with the product.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, make sure you buy your Silver Pass, eat that Snickers, buy some Progressive. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.